um, let's just give a little synopsis for everybody who's going to catch this video and hasn't seen any of your previous videos.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about how you got into the NSA, Majestic 12, and what years you were there, which encompasses the major Martin Luther King activity, and then just take off from there.
Okay, and before I do that, I'll clarify a little bit on the book for the people that were listening to that part. The first book is a black book, and it's the one that was sabotaged big time. And they were supposed to have a picture of me and Ted Gunderson on the back as a memorial to him. And they got a picture of me with Senator Kyle, and Senator Kyle signed it big and bold. And the black book has actually sold, one of them sold for something like $3,000 as a collector's item. And then the second publication basically got wiped out. And matter of fact, 2 days after the first one was printed, they ran me off the road with an 18-wheel truck, hoping for an unexplained highway fatality. And the book that is prayerfully not too messed with so far is the ebook that I put on Kindle ebooks. And Kindle was going to charge $29.95 for it. And I said, I won't give it to you. And so they said, how much do you want? And I told them, you got to sell it for under $10 or I won't give it to you. And so that everybody knows, actually, the book is all of my information and evidence, basically investigated and validated by Hall of Fame FBI National Chief Special Investigator Ted Gunderson. And I did the writing, but Ted approved everything I wrote as it was something that he could stand behind as 100% accurate. And then both Ted and I signed off on it. And when Ted did that, they called him in for a mandatory physical, and his immunization shots weren't immunizations, it was drugs. They drugged him up, and there were people that visited him in the hospital, and he told them, they're trying to kill me, get me out of here. And they were afraid to do anything. I told them, you should have told me. I'd have gone and got him, because I'm not afraid of those guys in the slightest. And so that's kind of how we got to where we were and where we are now. I gave Ted top billing on the book because, number one, he laid down his career and his life and joined me in the fight for truth and justice. So both Ted and I was seat 13 of Deep State. I'd be seat number 1 today, but I couldn't do the stuff that they were doing to get there. So Ted and I both laid down positions of some pretty heavy duty power and career in order to fulfill our oath to protect the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And MJ-12 is domestic. They're inside the U.S. Most of the members are citizens of the United States, with some outside members, etc., cooperating in other countries and all that. And so that's why I put the book out there, and I had them sell it for less than $10 because they said, well, you won't make any money. I said, well, if I'm not making any money, then there's only one reason for the book to be out there, and that's because it's the truth. So I'm not getting rich. I'm not getting famous. There is only one singular motive that stands in the publication of that book, and that is to get the truth to the people and fulfill my oath, and in memory of my partner who partnered with me on it, Ted Gunderson. Great guy. And we got another guy that actually partnered with us, and he was on Unsolved Mysteries. He's the guy where they found his body in the Maryland dump. So these people are dangerous people. And basically, I've had God's protection. I would have gone and protected Ted and got him out if people would have told me. So that's the stuff that we're covering all the way through Martin Luther King and everything, because the wrongs they go all the way back to like the Illuminati and the Knights Templar, and they go back to the founding of America. These people have their ancestry going all the way back to some of the people who were with George Washington. Unfortunately, there have been people all along some who wanted to build a country where we could worship God, be free, etc., and some who wanted to use that to control the world eventually. And it's the people who want to control the world that we're fighting, because Ted and I believe in government by the people, not by a few people or one person. Government by the people and for the people, not for a few people or one person. And then of the people means that the people, if you want your government, you have got to get involved. You have got to spend the time to find out what your legislators are doing. And don't just believe somebody who says something wild, because just like Robert Kennedy, we talked about on the last go round, and they claimed, or Ted Kennedy rather, they claimed he knew Mary Jo was in the car and they'd had an accident. Fact of the matter is, had he known that, they would have prosecuted him for manslaughter. Why did he not try to get her out of there? He was not prosecuted because they had more than enough evidence that, in fact, he could not remember even going to the party. And that is a side effect of PCP. If you get a very low amount of PCP will overdose a person. And when a person comes down, they have amnesia. And that's basically what happened there.
And that information right there, that then Senator Edward Kennedy was deliberately drugged to create an assassination attempt, because it was an attempt, wasn't a for sure thing.
That's right.
And this is the first time, well, actually, it was on the Edward Kennedy Part 3 that you disclose this. Is that the first time that this information has ever been disclosed in public?
I have been putting it out there, and MJ12 has been calling me a fraud, delusional. They had an outfit that was basically part of their misinformation outfit,
Right.
And they called themselves, I think it was like Fake Warrior or FakeWarrior.com, and they put me out there as being a fraud, and then they claimed that I had not been prosecuted because FBI and those guys had a backlog. Well, I've been doing this since '69, and FBI does not have any kind of 20, 30-year backlog. You know, and if I was a fraud, or who they say, they would have prosecuted me for impersonating an agent of the United States government. They would have prosecuted me for impersonating an officer, because I've got my identity stuff that says 04. And I told people I was a major, military rank, military credit for time served with civilian status. And now, actually, McCain helped me get some documents. And I've got documents to prove it, because I've got my debriefing form. And my debriefing form shows 04 rank, but it goes back to 67. They were not using social security numbers for regular military in 67. They were using O numbers for officers, RA numbers for enlisted. And mine...
Define that, what that means.
Okay, an O number was for an officer. Like, say, an officer would have O 569 28 32 54. It would be like, say, an O in front of either a social security number or whatever number they were using at the time. And that meant officer. RA meant regular Army, or RN, regular Navy, etc. And that would be for enlisted personnel like sergeants, corporals, and things like that.
Right.
I've also got a copy of my what they call it, DOD, not man, and my what do they call it now? Discharge. I've got a copy of my discharge document.
14.
Yep. And on my discharge documents, it says Army right? RA, which is regular Army, but that's my enlistment, because then it goes from there. The next two letters are MI. MI is military intelligence.
Right.
Regular Army enlisted intelligence were Army Security Agency. So an enlisted man coming out of intelligence would have RAASA, regular Army, Army Security Agency. All MI were officers. Their military intelligence were the officers leading all of your regular Army, regular Navy, etc. They were the officers who were in charge of all of the enlisted personnel. And they were the people who would be undercover, etc. So now I've got my documents, and even back then I said, come charge me. Come on. I told that outfit, I said, hey, if you guys think I'm a fake, and they even sent a deal that they reported me to National Security Agency, the CIA, the DOD. They reported me to everybody. But nobody ever knocked on my door to tell me, stop doing what you're doing. You're a fraud or whatever.
Right.
So,
all right. So through the military, that's how you got recruited into the NSA?
Right. I started out Army. I went Army and I excelled. Matter of fact, I told him I was interested in spy work. And that got me interested because my dad was the guy who kept the Normandy Day invasion records on his person 24/7. But I didn't tell him who my dad was. Instead of taking a star, he came home and my dad became the commander for the California National Guard. And if they look up Colonel Benoit or Benoist, they will see commander for the California National Guard. And so because I wanted to beat my dad. I wanted to make it on my record, not his. I didn't want any favoritism because of who he was. And so I went in and I told him, and my dad he'd opened a insurance brokerage. He was the first independent insurance agent. He convinced the insurance companies to let him write business they did not want with companies that did want it. So he had about 5 or 6 different insurance companies that he was writing insurance for, and his clients would have insurance with 4 or 5 companies through him. And so I went in and they said, well, we got to put you in regular stuff first and we'll watch you. Well, I got 178.4 on my GT score. You need 110 for officer.
What's your
and
GT
so
score?
Then they put me he was the toughest infantry commander, known to be the toughest in all of the Army for infantry training, etc. Captain Springer.
What's a GT score?
A GT score, that's kind of like your IQ test, your military IQ test.
Okay. Military aptitude, basically.
It's actually military, civilian, and everything. It shows the military everything that you might know. If you know electronics, if you're a linguist, they use your IQ to then decide where you might be a benefit to the military.
Okay.
And because I was high enough in all of them, they said, okay, let's put him in, he wants to be a spy. Let's see if he could, do that kind of stuff. Because they'll pull spies out of your Green Berets. They'll pull spies out of your Navy SEALs. Sometimes your Rangers end up going into that work. If they're smart enough and good enough, MJ-12 is always watching. And they want to pull the best into their outfit. So if they can convince you, hey, work with us, you're the best, they'll grab you. And I got the highest commander's evaluation that Captain Springer had ever given. You got 100 for performance, possible, and 100 for knowledge. And so you had 200 possible total. The highest he had ever given as a combined total was 75. And he told him, he says, they're just through basic. They're just starting to learn. So 37.5, as far as he was concerned, was a high score for somebody just getting out of basic. He called me in and he said, Benoit, he says, I called you in because it's evaluation time. I said, yes, sir, I know that. Thank you. And he says, Well, I want you to know nobody's perfect. And I kind of looked surprised. And I said, well, sir, I hope to God I never made anybody think that I think I'm perfect. I said, I don't want to give off that kind of aura like I'm high-minded and I'm perfect. I said, that's not my goal at all. He said, no, no. He said, you didn't do that. He said, I just wanted to say that and let you know that because of the fact that nobody's perfect, I had to dock you a point or two. I said, oh, that's okay. And he says, but I want you to know in my command, I did not see any imperfection. My score was 198.5. I got an Army commendation and a presidential citation graduating from basic and an immediate promotion as well. So I got out of basic, I think instead of E2, I was E3. And by the time I went to advanced infantry training, they had me at E4. And so then, and I got the highest commander's evaluation out of advanced infantry training. And then I went to Ranger. And then I was going to OCS and I was excelling there. And the boys in black came and said, are you still interested in being a spy? I said, yeah. They said, come with us. I said, well, I'm here at OCS now. They said, you come with us. And if you keep doing what you've been doing, we will take care of your commission. Well, then when I got together with Colonel Millett, who founded the intelligence school, I wasn't a personnel officer. When I got my discharge, DD 214, I knew MI showed something because I'd seen plenty of regular discharges, Army ASA, you know. And so I visited Colonel Millett at Idlewild, where he lived. And I said, I'm not a personnel officer, but I said, I know this gives me some evidence I need. And I said, mine is not U.S. Army RA ASA, it's RA MI. He said, yeah. He said, I got one just like it. Colonel Millett went from private E1 to full bird colonel with a Medal of Honor on top of it. And he said, I've got one just like it. He said, RAMI, he said, your regular Army enlistment contract ended right here at RA where it goes to MI. He said, they gave you a direct commission. But he said, my DD 214 is absolute positive proof I was an officer.
Okay.
Boom.
All right. So that's how you got into the NSA. When were you employed or attached to the NSA? What years?
Actually, it was, let's see. I did my training 66, 67. In 67, early 67, late 66 or early 67, they sent a group of our guys. I think it was late 66. Yeah, it was late 66. They sent our guys to Vietnam. And that's where we went to Camp Lejeune for orientation as to what Vietnam was going to be like and all of that stuff. And by then, as a matter of fact, they held me back and then commissioned me. And then they took me through everything at Camp Lejeune with a bunch of special trainers and that. And then they flew me to Vietnam to join the group as an officer and as platoon leader. And the commander, they had a colonel, they wanted him to get a star. He'd never been in the battlefield. To get a star, you had to have a battlefield command and you had to be, knowledgeable, et cetera, in that area.
Right.
So they wanted him to get a star. Well, the guy didn't even know how to read a map, really. And I tried to tell him, sir, I think we're in the wrong bay. I don't think we're where you think we are. We should not land. We need to double check where we are. And he said, don't tell me how to read a map. He said, look at the skyline. The skyline's right. I said, sir, the skyline looks like the topo skyline. But I said, you see that boulder right over there? And you see the smaller boulder in front of it? And he said, well, the high tide will cover that small boulder. I said, yes, sir. And I said, anything a ship can hit. I said, fog can hide the other boulder. because the one boulder can be covered, it has to be on the map. Just like at Crescent City, Jonathan Rock, that the Jonathan ship ran into and sank, there's no like black dot there, but there's these wavy lines showing that it's a rock underwater, and in those wavy lines is written Jonathan Rock.
Huh.
They named it after the Jonathan that went down because of it. So
Wow.
I told him, I said, anything a ship can hit has got to be shown on the topo. There are no rocks in the water. And I told him, I says, go to the skipper of the boat, get the longitude and latitude off the Loran, and I will plot exactly where we are. Well, the skipper of the boat doesn't need to know where we are. He has no need to know. I said, sir, you don't have to tell him anything. Just tell him you want the longitude and latitude off of the Loran and let him anchor for a moment so that we will be exactly where I plot us to be. Don't tell me, Benoit. I know what I'm doing. You stay back here. You send your assistant in. You're going to stay with me. I don't want you scaring them in. Well, you and I are going to go in later. So he sent everybody in, and I told my guys, I said, you're not assault trained. And I told them, I said, I don't care if you got to breathe out your ass. You stay low. And I said, somebody tells you to stand up and walk around or whatever, you tell them you're under orders to stay low and stay on guard and keep watch. But it was, I don't know, maybe an hour or so, hour and a half. Bunches of landing party and everything is there. Might have been 3 hours. All of a sudden, all hell broke loose. He was 28 clicks off course, landed the guys on a communist-held stronghold beach. And the communists just let them all come up. They stay hidden. And then when everybody's standing up and moving around, they hit them with all they had. It took 3 days of artillery and airstrike to drive the communists back far enough to go in and retrieve bodies and equipment. And I wanted the guy court-martialed for negligent homicide. And they said, no, we're just going to retire him. And I was super pissed. But that's where I met a guy who's one of my best friends today, Roger Grinstead. And Roger was over there with Army Security Agency. He was like their computer programmer and repair, radio repair, etc. And so he took care of all of their fancy equipment, and he had to be cleared for that. And so I was at Tan Son Nhut, which is Saigon now, and I was at the PX, and I was looking at these Meerschaum pipes, and Roger saw the brass I had because I wasn't going to be going in the field, so I had my regular brass on. And he said, I'm Army Security Agency over here at the base over here, do the repair stuff. And we started talking about the pipes. Later, they moved me back to Washington, took me back to Washington to our main training camp and everything there, and had me do a bunch of undercover work there. So basically, from the time of that battle, they took me into National Security Agency Internal Affairs. That's one of the things they used to buy me off. They said, you're not going to be a first lieutenant anymore. We're making you captain, and we're putting you in a major slot. You keep doing what you're doing, and you get the same eval you've been getting, and on the next evaluation, you'll be a major. And they said, you'll be internal affairs for national security, and at that point, if you see a colonel like that guy doing something wrong, you can put him under arrest immediately. So I figured, okay, at least I'll be able to do something. So they sent me back then to Fort Devens to do this undercover work and everything. And people didn't know it, but we had a bunch of nuclear warheads stored at Fort Devens in Air, Massachusetts. And a couple of them came up missing. It took me less than 24 hours to break that case and have the two people that were responsible and recover the warheads. So then they said, hey, you're a hot shot. We're elevating you. They said, we're giving you your eval now. Your rank is permanent. And I was allergic to the shots that they needed really to like send me to overseas to Germany and stuff. But they said, we've got to give you these shots for Germany. we're ordered, we've got to send you to Germany. There's a bunch of stuff breaking loose over there that's going to be happening. And that was the Czechoslovakian crisis. So they said, we've got to give you one shot at a time, bring you through the reaction, and you're going overseas. And then that's where I ended up in Germany, which is where then I ended up with working with the 12, because that was our most secret base in the world. We took Hitler's base we couldn't find, turned it into our base, and that was basically the center for the 12. That's where they kind of had their hidden meetings and stayed hidden.
Huh. Okay. I'm not going to say that's coincidental, but all right. All right. So that got you into MJ12. And you did that up until 69, correct?
Yeah. And actually, I found out what was going on, and I told them they needed to change and straighten up. Basically, that was around, I'd say, February or March of 69. I had already put in for permission to marry a German national, and God set that up, timing and everything. And they said, and I said, you guys need to obey the law. They said, we are the law. Because once I got over there, I had carte blanche access, and I learned about the room where they kept all of the records that would be swiftly destroyed if the enemy started coming at us. They had this room, and everything in that room could be destroyed within 5 minutes. Well, I knew that's where they're going to hide the stuff they don't want anybody to see.
Right.
So on my so-called off time, or any time I had, I would go into that room, and I went through records going all the way back to the 20s. And they even had some records in there going back to World War I in 1911.
Okay. All right. So that gets us caught up to your tenure at the NSA and with Majestic 12. So let's dive into Martin Luther King, what that looks like. I pulled up his Wikipedia page just to kind of give everybody a quick little synopsis of what he is all about. Run through this real quick. Here you go. Martin Luther King Jr. And again, this is Wikipedia. Take it with a grain of salt. Not everything you see here is 100% accurate. So we'll leave it at that. Martin Luther King Jr., born Michael King Jr., January 15th, 1929, and assassinated April 4th, 1968. He was an American Baptist minister, activist, and political philosopher who was one of the most prominent leaders in the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. King advanced civil rights for people of color in the United States through the use of nonviolent resistance and nonviolent civil disobedience against Jim Crow laws and other forms of legalized discrimination. And there's a picture of MLK. And we will dive into what actually you see. Where was it at? Here you go. King was jailed several times. Federal Bureau of Investigation Director J. Edgar Hoover considered King a radical and made him. Let's talk about Hoover on a show.
Yeah, Hoover would definitely basically try to brand Martin Luther King, because Hoover was like the sergeant at arms for MJ12.
Right.
And Martin Luther King, his main idol was the guy who started the Lutheran Church, because Martin Luther, the Catholic Church originally said that only priests could have Bibles, only priests could interpret the Bible, because common people did not have the spirit and the understanding from God to be able to interpret the Bible. And Martin Luther said, nuh-uh, God's word is for everybody. And that's why Martin Luther King took Martin Luther as his hero, and that the Bible and salvation and freedom fit the Bible verse. There is neither red, yellow, black, nor white, bond nor free, male nor female in the Lord, for we are all one in the Lord. And that was one of his favorite verses. And that was like the driving force behind him and his movement. And of course, J. Edgar Hoover and MJ12, oh, there's definite separation. They literally said people are too stupid to decide their own destiny. And I said, hey, wait a minute, man. You know, God gave us salvation. God gave people the right to decide and gave people choice on the cross, which is a blood covenant, can only be broken by the destruction of the one who breaks it. And I said, you guys are not God. They said, we're God for this world.
Right. Let me read this quick synopsis. In 1968, King was planning a national occupation of Washington, D.C. Wow, when have we heard that before? To be called the Poor People's Campaign. When he was assassinated on April 4th in Memphis, Tennessee, James Earl Ray, a fugitive from the Missouri State Penitentiary, was convicted of the assassination. Though the King family believes he was a scapegoat, the assassination remains the subject of conspiracy theories. King's death was followed by national mourning, as well as anger leading to riots in many U.S. cities. King was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1977 and the Congressional Gold Medal in 2003. Martin Luther King Jr. Day was established as a holiday in cities and states throughout the United States beginning in 1971. The federal holiday was first observed in 1986. The Martin Luther King Memorial on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. was dedicated in 2011. So let's dive into this. What do you know about the plot to assassinate MLK as far as pre-assassination planning, the actors involved, the authorities that created and established the assassination attempt, the after effects, what you know about James Earl Ray and his position in all of this? Were there other conspirators in the assassination? And if you know about the cover up, explain that as well.
Yep. If people will, matter of fact, we've got a really good, more current example of the same plan, shall we say. Martin Luther King was going to fill Washington, D.C. peacefully because his marches were peaceful. The only violence in his marches were basically people attacking him and his people. And MJ12 and their sergeant at arms, the head of the FBI, Hoover, plotted against him to prevent that. And there again, they did the assassination prevention like they had done in previous instances or plans like that. This last time, they couldn't go against the person who actually had a peaceful statement being made in Washington. So they paid, George Soros paid people to put on Donald Trump t-shirts and stir up violence. And then the MJ12 agents and cooperatives and partners in the radical Democrat group claimed that it was an insurrection and the beginning of a civil war, and Donald Trump was the leader of it. And quite frankly, when Trump had his Supreme Court cases, people can check this. I sent the Supreme Court in both cases what's called an amicus curiae brief. It's a friend of the court brief. In it, I put my credentials that I can't show everybody, and I gave it to them to be sealed and for their eyes only, so they would know that I know what I'm talking about, and I am who I say I am. In that, I told them that back in the 70s, the militias across the U.S. wanted me to lead them, and they wanted to go ahead and seize every government hospital, every government agency, every government office. And there were several thousand. And we could have done it. And they wanted to totally seize every government office and refuse to release those offices until Washington, D.C. made a treaty agreement and changed a bunch of stuff. And they wanted me to lead them. And I said, guys, if I'm your leader and we go to court, basically I'd have to answer questions or they'd have me for contempt of court and all kinds of stuff. I said, I'm a minister. I'm a credentialed minister. I went into ministry for a reason. I said, I will be your national chaplain. And then you guys can ask me for advice. And we're covered by minister parishioner privilege, which is the same as attorney-client privilege. And so I told him, I said, I worked some with Bush and we got some stuff done. And I said, we'll keep looking. And I said, I will try to recruit and get good people to run for office. And we'll try to get the right people in office where we can get some things done. I started building that group. And that is the group that basically spread. And I also founded the National American Indian Veterans, Glory to God United Ministries Worldwide, Truckers Fight for Justice. So I founded a bunch of national and international groups who know they can trust my word. And I put out the word, we need Reagan in office. And I had already left that. I signed off on the Democrats. And I told them, I said, that's it, man. Reagan's going to be the president. He's the only one we could trust. And I told Reagan, I said, you need to make a covenant with God and take a stand for God. And if you do, God will protect you. And Reagan opened the national convention for the Republicans. And he said, I'm a little afraid to do this, but I'm more afraid not to. And he said, let us have a moment of silent prayer and pray for the guidance of God. And I said, amen. Boom. He's doing it. And Reagan and I set up a deal where I would put codes on anything that I sent him. And my stuff was in a special paper. And he told everybody, you see this special envelope comes in, and it's got these codes on it. If somebody opens it and it does not get to me, that person will be at Leavenworth. And he told him, I'll try you for treason. He said, and you just might get hung. He made no bones about it. And he told me that he would show me that he got my letter or my information. And if I didn't see and get the confirmation that he got it, then send it again by another means. And what he would do is he would have a press conference. So I would watch, I'd send my stuff and I would watch. Within 2 weeks, he'd have a press conference. In that press conference would be 2 or 3 sentences from my communication, word for word. When I saw those 2 or 3 sentences from my communication, word for word, I knew he got my communication. And people didn't know it, but people that were applying for college, the college entrance form had a question on it: have you received your mark yet? The Democrats expected to beat Reagan, and they were ready to implement a mark. People who had Social Security checks, that was their money, they had it coming, and IRS tax refunds, they had the money coming. Their checks, they could not do anything with because the check had a little statement on it: bearer must have mark in right hand or forehead. And I sent that evidence to Reagan, and I said, if you're going to keep your covenant with God, kill this program. He killed the program, and they shot him a week later.
Well, hold on, go back and repeat that over.
Yeah, true story. See, we had a deal, Reagan and I would send him communications. He would have a press conference, and 2 or 3 sentences that were in the communications I sent him would be in that press conference, word for word. He'd read it off the teleprompter or whatever, and it would be word for word. And then I knew he got my information. And I sent him information showing that the Democrats expected to win the election and they were ready to implement the mark. They were going to demand everybody in America get a mark in a right-hand or forehead. They had a little computer chip that they could put in the back of your neck with less irritation than a mosquito bite. That computer chip and that mark on your right hand or forehead would allow them to monitor everything about you 24/7. They would know your blood pressure. They'd know if you were having sex. They would know where you were and everything going on because that computer chip could constantly feed the computer every detail.
And what year was this?
They had that ready to go in 1980.
1980. So that was during the Carter administration that the Democrats came out with this nefarious plan. It's satanic.
Yeah, it was ready to go for going from Carter. Oh, they expected to win. And when Reagan won, and that's why they were going to win, so they released all of these applications figuring their man was going to be in power. And Reagan beat him. And all of a sudden, boom, 1980, Reagan killed that program. And it wasn't too long after that, I sent him stuff on it, and he basically discovered more about it. And then he made moves to kill every bit of it. And when he made the moves needed to kill all of it, then he was shot not too long after that.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's the tie-in.
So basically, the same technology that Elon Musk is developing with the Neuralink implant, brain implant.
Right.
That's the public aspect of it. Okay. That's being released. Here we are, what, 50 years later, roughly?
And actually, MJ12 and the NSA does not release anything to the civilian market until they are 50 years ahead of it. So AI coming out, NSA and MJ12 has stuff that is 50 years ahead of what's being released.
Yes, absolutely. And let me ask you, this is totally off topic, but I'm going to ask the question now.
Sometimes we go down a good rabbit trail.
Yeah. Did you have any interaction or a relationship with the late retired Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso?
I know the name.
Okay. That's from Roswell.
He might know me or whatever. The name sounds familiar.
Okay.
One that I did interact with when I was there as a government agent and stuff was our reverse engineering guy, Bob Lazar. That's why I remembered his name, because he was in reverse engineering. And did Colonel Corso, was he where we had some of the ETs pickled in formaldehyde?
Right.
Was he in some of that section?
He was in the foreign technology office for, I believe, the Army. Here we go. I'm going to pull up his Wikipedia. Wikipedia is so handy. I read the book the day after Roswell. All right. Philip James Corso. He passed away in 1998. He was an American Army officer. He served the United States Army from February 23rd.
He looks really familiar, super familiar.
Yeah, he earned the rank of lieutenant colonel. Published the day after Roswell. He had a co-author that probably wrote the gist of it. Counterintelligence Corps in Rome for Army intelligence.
Okay.
Let's see. Corso was on the staff of President Eisenhower's National Security Council for 4 years, from 53 to 57. In 60,
Okay, yeah, I knew him then. I know who he is now. Yeah,
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 in
because I met one of the guys over there. I don't remember. He was a higher officer when I was there, and he had mentioned, because I talked about my experience with Eisenhower, where Eisenhower drove by the school because he wanted to see one of Dad's boys,
okay,
and he says, "Oh, I worked for Eisenhower at one time."
right.
Yeah.
Okay, in 1961, Corso became the chief of the Pentagon's Foreign Technology Desk in Army Research and Development, working under Lieutenant General Arthur Trudeau.
Trudeau, I knew. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
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 And basically, what they had is one of those 3 and 4 drawer uh, old metal file cabinets that had some type of locking system on it.
Yep.
And Trudeau would call Corso into his office, and they'd have some foreign material, whatever it was, the silicone chip, microwave, the laser technology, a bunch of different technologies came from this file
From
cabinet,
yeah.
and it's
And
recovered alien technology.
yep.
And what Corso's job strictly was, working under Trudeau, was to take this technology, whatever it was, and incorporate it into the private sector, whether that would be, and I'm just going to throw this out there because I know it exists, Penn State University's Department of Naval Research Laboratory, or
Right.
somebody like Boeing or Marietta, uh, Lockheed Martin,
Yep.
companies like that, or universities or corporations. I'll just use Microsoft or Apple or someplace like that.
Right.
They take the technology to their research and development department and say, hey, we have this, we don't know what it is, can you reverse engineer it? And boom, that's how we got this leap in technology after 1947. So that's
Right.
that's what Roswell or Corso did. If you ever get a chance to read this book the day after Roswell, it is an excellent book, very eye-opening. Here's one of your majestic 12. Corso also says a covert government group was assembled under the leadership of Admiral Roscoe H. Hillenkoetter, the first
Yep.
director of the Central Intelligence, see Majestic 12. Among its tasks was to collect all information of off-planet technology. The U.S. administration simultaneously discounted the existence of flying saucers in the eyes of the public, Corso says.
Right. And see, I purposely, God kept me away from all of those things like that and all of these different theological books,
Right?
because they would claim that I was the product of what I read. But having never read any of that, and I'm saying the same thing, now we have 2 independent testimonies, and 2 independent testimonies saying the same thing gives you a conviction at trial.
Okay.
So that's why I've operated the way I have.
Right?
And yeah, but I knew him and some of those guys. And
And we'll get into all this. We'll do some more shows and we'll talk about all this stuff specifically. But some of the reversed engineered artifacts, accelerated particle beams, which I'm sure have evolved into directed energy weapons, fiber
yep,
optics,
yeah,
lasers, integrated
yeah,
circuit chips, and Kevlar material. In the book, Corso claims the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, or Star Wars, it was so fondly adopted by Congress and the executive branch during the Reagan administration, was meant to achieve the destructive capacity of electronic guidance systems in incoming enemy warheads, as well as disabling enemy spacecraft, including those of extraterrestrial origin. So not to get off the topic of
yeah,
MLK, but
yeah. Well, and see, actually, Martin Luther knew about a lot of this stuff too, because friends he had, people who would, let's say, get their life straight, and they would talk to him, etc. And look at Corso's photo, and think for a minute. Look at Corso's photo, and see what kind of feel you get off of his picture.
Let me pop it back up for everybody.
Now look at that look, and look at that photo. Now you looking at that face. Do you feel like trust coming off of that face, or do you feel like watch out?
You're the profiler.
But and that see, and the thing is, off of that face, he's got the CIA face. I mean, CIA agents, it's like I look at them and they've got that watch out face.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, and this is like another little side question. I hate to get off the topic, but because I have this issue with people claiming to espouse intelligence from the United States government. So you're definitely been cleared way above top secret clearance.
Oh, yeah.
That's the highest of the high, I would assume. And when you're in that position and you go on social media like you are right now, if you were still in the intelligence community, still had your security clearance, could you be able to expose intel in the public sphere? What would happen to you? What are the consequences if you did that?
Well, actually, see, my authority and my clearance, the expiration date and that is listed right on the document, indefinite. I still have it. See, that's why I could easily interact with Trump. And matter of fact, when I went there with the American Indians, and then Secret Service and everything came over and they wanted to see what was in the tube and everything, I gave to one guy my ID and said, just have your watch commander check my ID. And the guy came back and he says, who's Benoist? And I said, that'd be me. He came up to me, saluted, said, glad to meet you, sir. Guys, he's cleared. And the one black guy with his badge, he comes up and he says, I'm Secret Service. He says, who the H are you? I said, MAGCOM, seat 13, Internal Affairs for All Matters of National Security, more or less retired. And he's like, oh, well, we, and even my cousin, Marvin Young Dog, was there. He saw the look on that guy's face. And anytime I introduce myself to like a Secret Service agent or somebody who knows what's going on that way, you will see the reaction of, oh, and so, but I cannot, there's still stuff I cannot talk about, but all the stuff I'm talking about is stuff that I got Bill Clinton and Reagan and Bush and Trump to basically expose. When the president declares something as no longer top secret or above top secret, etc., then I can expose it, number one. Number two, they might try me or charge me if I expose some of the secrets. However, as long as I've got a good defense that, hey, I'm exposing this because the people need to know, and exposing it is in the interest of national security, they wouldn't be able to get a conviction. But they'd make life hell for me.
Yeah, that's what they want to do.
Yeah. And see,
right.
I in the brief that I gave the Supreme Court, I told the Supreme Court the militias called me with all this evidence of election fraud and asked me what to do, and I told them Antifa and those guys get maybe 50, 100, 150 people. They cause violence. They do a lot of harm to innocent people. I said, go fill Washington, D.C. If you can get 2 or 3 million of our people in there, fill Washington, D.C. But I said, check in with President Trump. Let him know that I sent you and that we are there to peacefully demonstrate and to peacefully say to the Electoral College, we have evidence of election fraud from all 50 states, and we demand that the Electoral College be put on hold pending an independent investigation. So we were calling for a proper independent investigation, and Trump told everybody, hey, they talked to me. Yeah, I told them be peaceful. So they coordinated, and the guards were letting them in at first because they knew our guys were there to be peaceful. Soros and those guys paid a bunch of guys to go cause violence wearing Trump t-shirts. And then the Democrats started screaming, it's a revolution, it's a revolution. Oh, we've got to, close everything down.
Allegedly.
Smear and fear. They used fear to shut it down and smear to keep it shut down. And they charged the innocent and put the innocent in jail. The Soros paid people were released.
Yeah. Yes. 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 We
And
came
that's the
so
kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff King was fighting too.
right. Yeah, we've came very close to having a satanic country.
Yeah. See, so they used the same main tactic that they used against King, except with King, they killed him to kill Washington being filled with a bunch of people calling for what's right. And they shot and caused violence with Trump t-shirts on their soldiers in order to stop Trump and our people from filling DC and demanding what was right. That's the similarities between the two. They just altered the King tactics a little bit to fit the time of the day. And then they use smear and fear against Trump.
Wow. All right, let's dive into the Martin Luther King assassination. Who planned it? Who set it up?
MJ-12 planned it. Deals like that is always the 12. They don't, well, when I was in, I could have done it as seat 13 because I was I was internal affairs for all matters of national security. I could have I could put a bullet between a person's eyes and have no investigation. They'd get a Warren type report. This is what the report says. This is the way it is, And
Right.
so I would be able to do that. Oh, just a second. Kind of put a hold on. I got the hospital. They're gone.
Go ahead, take it. Go ahead and take that call. All right, I got it right here. Noel's going to take a call backstage, and I will handle it from here. So, astonishing information being released today regarding all over the place. That's why I love talking to Noel, because I let him go a little bit and we get a whole new subject, a whole new topic, a whole new show to do. So I'm very thrilled about that. And it looks like he's completed his task.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. That was mainly the hospital confirming my Monday appointment with cardiology.
Okay. Yeah. Anytime you need to take a call or anything like this, let me know.
Yep.
I'll bump you backstage.
Yep. And see, the thing is, I care about this so much that's why cardiology is getting after me. My blood pressure has been running 160 to 180.
Wow.
And constantly over 140 is danger of stroke. So they got me on blood pressure meds. The second number has actually been fairly good. And so, but and I told him, I mean, the top number I can't really do a whole lot about because this is so important to me, but God's keeping me alive. So even with high blood pressure, I'm I'm staying alive.
Right. Yeah, I get it. Thank you for doing this.
And I've got pictures of my blood pressure showing like 160, 179, 180, stuff like that. Matter of fact, I took my blood pressure this morning and sent that in. And look, come here, you get the right deal here. Oh, come on. Boom. Come on. Trying to get a picture up here. These touch deals sometimes are a pain. Let's see. There we go. Come here now. There we go. Okay. So maybe you can see this.
Let me bump me off the screen.
173 over 69, pulse 60.
That's nuts, bro.
So I tell the people the truth, and I tell people, don't ask me a question if you're not ready for the answer, because I'm going to tell you the truth whether you like it or not. You know, and I know Trump didn't like me telling him that J.D. Vance was possibly a bad pick, and I ran my write-in campaign to make a statement. But I told him, I said, I'm trying to save you from yourself. And that's one thing about Trump that Trump appreciates about me. He knows I'm going to tell him the truth no matter what. I won't. Right. I mean, when he makes his decision, I'll go along with him, and now I'm praying that, and I told him, I said, well, as long as J.D. Vance is going to be the vice president, we need to really show J.D. Vance the whole truth about MJ-12 and just how bad they are. And then we need J.D. Vance to take the path that I took, which is to say MJ-12 is bad and they got to straighten up. And the ones that won't straighten up and the ones that have done horrific wrongs need to be dealt with. And prayerfully, so, if we can get him totally on our side, if he can become, and it's wild because I got one deal I posted, Trump sent me a email, Noel Benoist, vice president. That's got a really great sound. And instead of saying, yes, I'll do it, I probably should have said yes. I don't know. I hope I didn't make a mistake. But I said, well, I don't like the spirit of DC, but if you need me, I'll come. And so then he decided with all the stuff I've done, he didn't want to impose, And so then he chose Vance. And well, then actually he sent me, I've got instant messages from him. I want my VP to be exactly like Noel. Who shall I pick? And when he found Vance and he decided to choose Vance, that's when I looked Vance up and everything. And Vance is a whole lot like me, So he did pick somebody that's a whole lot like Noel. The trouble is he's also like me with an MJ-12 contacts.
Right.
He's an ideal MJ-12 operative too. So prayerfully, he's going to be like me and flip to our side.
Wow. Okay. All right. Let's dive back into Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
MJ-12 set up the entire thing. So was James Earl Ray deliberately escaped from a Missouri penitentiary to go be the patsy, the scapegoat for this particular act? And was it actually conducted by another person or persons?
It was a setup. It was a setup. And yeah, they they will pick prisoners to do stuff with, and they'll basically they can pick. They know they've got a database of people who can potentially be used for whatever, and that database is it's in their big computer. And with AI and all the other stuff they've got, and profilers like me have done stuff, then they will always have anywhere from 10 to 50. Hospital's calling back.
Go ahead. I got you. All right. Kick him backstage for a second. Unbelievable. The information that we're receiving. So James Earl Ray is a patsy, obviously not the assassin, as we have been led to believe, but it is what it is. You're hearing this, straight from the source. I'm going to ask him another question because most of you are unfamiliar with Cray computers. If you know anything about Cray computers, they were the supercomputer, the godfather of supercomputers. They were the first ones that was created by what was Cray's full name? And they are still in existence. Get over here and cover those real quick. And Noel looks like he's still on the phone. Are you good to go? Okay, he's still on the phone. Couldn't tell if he's talking to me or talking to the phone, to the iPad. So here we go. This is Cray Incorporated, a subsidiary of Hewlett Packard Enterprise, is an American supercomputer manufacturer headquartered in Seattle, Washington. It also manufactures systems for data storage and analytics. Several Cray supercomputer systems are listed in the top 500, which ranks the most powerful supercomputers in the world. In 1972, the company was founded by computer designer Seymour Cray as Cray Research Incorporated, and it continues to manufacture parts in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, where Cray was born and raised. After being acquired by Silicon Graphics in 1996, the modern company was formed after being purchased in 2000 by Terra Computer Company, which adopted the name Cray Inc. In 2019, the company was acquired by Hewlett Packard Enterprise for a sum certain of $1.3 billion. So in 1950, Seymour Cray began working in the computing field when he joined Engineering Research Associates, ERA, in St. Paul, Minnesota. There, he helped create ERA 1103. ERA eventually became part of UNIVAC and began to be phased out. In 1960, he left the company a few years after former ERA employees set up Control Data Corporation, CDC. He initially worked out of the CDC headquarters in Minneapolis, but grew upset by constant interruptions by managers. He eventually set up a lab in his hometown of Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, about 85 miles to the east. Cray had a string of successes at CDC, including CDC 6600 and CDC 7600. Cray Research Incorporated and Cray Computer Corporation, 72 to 1976. When CDC ran into financial difficulties in the late 60s, development funds for Cray's follow-up on CDC 8600 became scarce. When he was told the project would have to be put on hold, in 1972, Cray left to form his own company, Cray Research Inc. Copying the previous arrangement, Cray kept the research and development facilities in Chippewa Falls and put the business headquarters in Minneapolis. The company's first product, the Cray 1 supercomputer, was a major success because it was significantly faster than all other computers at the time. The first system was sold within a month for $8.8 million. Seymour Cray continued working, this time on Cray 2, though it ended up being only marginally faster than the Cray XMP, developed by another team at the company. And go in, but I just wanted to cover that about the Cray computers, because I know Noel is going to know a little bit about that and have something to add to that. So as you see, funding fell off in the late 60s. So who stepped in and funded Cray computers, took it over? Who bought the first one? All right, looks like Noel's back. So let's dig in. Thank you for hanging around after the show. I want to present to you Tailor-Made Trust, featuring Ann LaFleur's Trust Series, available at tailormadetrust.com, as well as thefearlessfloydshow.com. www.assassination.com store. Here are a handful of the available trusts that can be built, custom tailored to your needs and desires. 25 different trusts, plus the DNA trust addendum. And as always, Ann LaFleur's classic trusts and ancillary classes, and also Ann's books on trust and specialty trust, which I also co-authored. If you'd like to get a class, a book, or have a trust custom built for you, always available at the fearlessfloydshow.com store. And I'll see you in the next show. Thank you for watching and have an awesome day.